the atmosphere, the climate, and the environment to create accurate biomes that spring naturally from the collision of all these environments. Coherent, denser biomes that follow the laws of nature that we encode into data. Data that we then leverage to place flora and fauna, yes, but also settlements, buildings, alien and human life in a planetary context. This creates worlds that are scientifically plausible, richer in gameplay opportunities. We want you to find adventure just by going around the planet without a quantum point. We want you to find actions along your path. For this, we are changing how we make the game. We are scaling how we make the game in all areas. This is not just a Planet Tech update. This is a collection of systems that we call Genesis. Now, to help me explain all this nice work and this nice technology, let us kick us off. And I welcome our very own Ali Brown and Will Hine for Phase 1 of Genesis.
So Ali is the Senior Director of Graphics and Procedural Tech, and Will is a Senior Engine Programmer.
Hello, Star Citizen?
Yes, hello, Citcon.
Yeah.
Hooray!
So let's start with some introductions. This guy over here is Will Hine, aka Water Guy or River Guy.
And this lovely gentleman is Ali Brown, pusher of pixels extraordinaire.
And we're here to tell you about Phase 1 of Genesis, which we're entitling The Laws of Nature. And this revolves around the fundamental approach we use to build our planet, and is the literal foundation for everything else we're going to talk about in this talk today. Now, it centers on data-driven, physically-based rules that we aim to realistically emulate nature and its incredible diversity. Before we dive in a bit deeper, let's just recap on some of the things we already have on our planet. So here you can see our lovely atmosphere and our cloud rendering, which can provide some spectacular views. We have our on-the-fly terrain generation, which is no loading screens in our game, which we're very proud of. And then we have our scattering system that can populate these planets with many different diverse biomes. And we've been setting quality benchmarks for each of these biomes as we come across them, one by one.
But what we have isn't perfect. This scene on Microtech, it looks great, but it's not getting the same density that you'd expect from a real pine forest. That's one of the things we want to solve. The other, if I take you to the other side of Microtech, you'd be excused if you thought we'd just turned around and looked at a different part of the forest. Why is that? Well, this is because currently our artists create slices of biomes in great number, and then they distribute them across the planet using humidity and temperature properties. Each slice looks great in isolation, as you've seen, as you've explored. But this is not the solution to give us varied and natural biomes across an entire planet. Additionally, just using humidity and temperature limits us to only 2 degrees of variation. And that's not enough for the sorts of planets and worlds that we want to create and for you to explore.
So how are we going to scale up our planet generation? Well, as I said before, we're going to start with physically based rules that drive everything. We want nothing to feel random on these planets. We want no limitations on the number of biomes. We want infinite biomes that are continuously changing across the planet. And we want extreme density, and we want to maintain or exceed all of the quality levels we've set with our existing biomes. And most importantly, we want it to be scalable, so that we can really scale up to the level of content that the designers are expecting. And from your perspective, we want you to be able to truly explore and find unique playing opportunities everywhere on our planets. So to start this, we're going to need more data. So if we say here some of our existing data sets on our planets, we have temperature, which we define locally and globally, and humidity, and that's it for now. With Genesis, we add many other data sets, such as the geology type, the soil type, and then we also go for things like the soil depth and the quality and the nutrients, and many other properties all drive this complex data set that we use to build rule sets on that each individual asset can describe how it should work with them.
We're going to put something together and show you some demos today using some of the assets that you've already know and love in the PD. Although you might see some new stuff later, we'll save that. What you're going to see is a vertical slice of development. It's very early stages, very work in progress, you might see some bugs, but
That means it's only going to get better, so be excited. The number one challenge with planets in our game is scale. In no other context do you need a planet to look great from a first-person perspective when you're stood among the trees. You need it to look great when you're in a spaceship with a quantum marker miles away, and everywhere in between. There are no loading screens to see everything. We cannot afford for it to look bad in any of those scenarios. So, let's start from a ground perspective. Demo number one. Let's have a look. So, how do we make that? So, let's talk about first what's underneath it all. The ground! So, in our previous terrain shader, we just switched between different ground textures depending on climate and didn't really consider the unique properties of each type. Now, the terrain shader is based around 4 layers. We always first consider bedrock at the bottom of it all. Then where appropriate, we have layers of soil of different types. We then add debris where appropriate, whether it be pine needles, dead leaves, etc. And then when it gets cold, we add snow. Each of these layers has unique shading properties and unique transitions between them. Because we do this all in one shader, we're able to achieve that as well as being performant. We can also use things like water saturation to darken and tint the soil and other properties to make it look more realistic. But that's not what filled most of the screen in that demo. That's the vegetation. Like what Ali said, we want to emulate the laws of nature, so in Genesis we have rule sets for every asset that tells it how to respond to our rich data, whether it be soil type, water availability, temperature, geology, or whatever. We assess the viability and the vitality of each asset and compare them to decide what is likely to spawn in a natural environment. This automatically creates the cohesive environment that you saw in that clip. Not handcrafted anymore. No one has told those ferns and those pines to be like that. They each want to be like that. And that's what we're doing, multiple assets coming together to create a unique microclimate. What about trees then? Same thing. They have a larger requirement for space, they have a larger requirement for nutrients. That's how you see the distribution, and it's how it all works. Let's meet the flora that came together to make that forest, and have a look at some of their properties. Now, just to note, they're all going to look quite similar because we've already seen them in the same place, so there must be something. So, building blocks, like grass, and common grass, medium amounts of sunlight. We have ferns, see a much lower requirement for sunlight. We have salix bushes forming our undergrowth. And we have pines, of course, and multiple variations of pines. Diversity is driven by competition. Everything has ideal conditions, which affects its competitiveness. We also have additional control over this in the form of dominance, which allows us to make one asset more competitive and more dominant than another, which is just what we see in nature. Everything is constantly fighting for resources and, of course, light. Because we spawn these assets in a hierarchy, it's easy to propagate shade data down over the distribution of the assets so that we can control ones that prefer or reject shade. Often, like these ferns, they can spawn in light, but they are outcompeted in those scenarios most of the time. So you will see a rogue fern, or a place where there's no seeds for a specific asset, you might start to get this coming in. Let's take a look from a larger perspective again.
So, to take you through some of the things we saw in that clip, let's talk about rocks first. So, anyone that's done a lot of ground driving and ground vehicles might have seen that our rocks sometimes feel a little bit randomly scattered. It can be quite an obstacle sometimes. So, in this clip, you saw that the rocks are no longer randomly scattered, and they're now placed based on physically based rule sets. And this logical grouping is achieved via erosion simulations which we run offline to build localized data maps. And they describe the size of the aggregate and rocks and the density and where they should naturally form. And that means we get things like these natural clusters of boulders at the forest edge underneath the cliffside. And on that note, you might have noticed that the cliffs have been dramatically improved in how they shade. We also see things like the natural clumping of vegetation caused by seed dispersal. This is controlled per species, so we can get better emulation of their unique growth patterns and create a much more realistic environment. And we also calculate the slope aspect, which is the exposure to vegetation to solar radiation and other environmental factors. And this allows us different species to flourish in different conditions, as we can see on different sides of this valley. And over a larger scale, we calculate the age and vitality of each tree individually to drive exactly how high they should be, but also the colour of their leaves. Now, this isn't the only thing that will drive the colour of the leaves. We're going to introduce the concept of seasons to the game. And this will mean that our plants will evolve through the year, and we'll be able to shed leaves from trees and have the grass river and river.
Whoa! Wow, that is cool.
So as you start to see, all these rules, all this data, it's all come together to create what we call truly emergent biomes. Let's have one more look at how this varies over a much larger scale. Just like in real life, just like in real life, our areas should vary, even if we're travelling a few kilometres. If you get in a helicopter and fly over the Alps, it all looks a bit snowy, but when you look closer, it's constantly changing. And we're now able to accurately represent that with our changing data. Another very important factor to mention is the distant look. In this screenshot, you don't see a single tree, and yet the terrain is still green. We previously did that with artist-made lookup tables that told the planet what colour to be at what position. But that wasn't going to work with all our new data and our far more complex spawning. Now we have a systemic solution. The planet shader is able to intelligently evaluate what's going to spawn there using the same rule sets that cause the assets to spawn there. When you get there, that means we can sample the sort of colour that is going to project onto the orbital view and use it. We get a far better accuracy from the result. Together, by creating rules and authoring data that works, we create a continuously varying planet that sets the scene for the incredible exploration gameplay I know you guys are going to have. But how have we done this without compromising on performance?
So yeah, with all these new data sets and these physically based spawning rules, you're probably wondering, how is this going to handle in your CPU? We don't want to melt anyone's CPU, so we've designed all of this tech to work much more efficiently than before, and now it can run on many cores. This allows it to be run perfectly well on both the CPU and the GPU. So we've redesigned our framework so that we can run it at both and swap between them freely. Now, the benefit of this is we can do things like, first off, move the terrain system to the GPU, and we've now done that to get some incredible performance improvements, but we then also cache the results in something we call a virtual terrain texture. Let's give you a quick demo of this now. This is now vastly faster than the previous system, but it also allows us to generate the terrain at much higher resolution, which means all the popping you can see on the mountains as we're approaching, all of that should be completely eliminated on the right-hand side of the screen.
Oh, wow.
With the extra headroom we've gained by making our terrain system more efficient, we've been able to introduce some improvements, including high-resolution ground textures, proper blending between surface types, and of course better tiling. If you're familiar with NMR Planets, we've taken off all the assets so you can see the issue, and now how it looks, you don't see those lines going at all. With the terrain data cached on the GPU, like Ali said, we can perform the scattering there too, which is significantly faster. All those algorithms that we've used to generate those first bits can run there without being more expensive on your CPU. And it also means the results are directly there on the GPU. We can render straight from them. That allows us to have dramatically more density in our new system. We can render objects directly without having to go via the CPU every frame. We also cull at different levels of granularity, with bigger groups in the distance and individual assets up close. Just as a demonstration, this is the sort of density you can expect on microtech today, and in a second we flip over to what you can expect from the new upcoming tech.
Oh, wow.
In a second we're going to turn on the culling groups that those you can see. These are the groups that we create of those trees and of the terrain, and as we get closer we shrink them so we're more intelligently rendering what we need without having to assess each tree individually, all the way down to the ground.
So to recap some of the things you've seen here in phase one, we had data-driven rules based on physically based data, generating emergent biomes that continuously vary across our planets to get infinite possibilities. And we've achieved this with much greater density than before and with much faster rendering. And we also achieved seamless transitions from ground to space with zero popping. So now that we've got all this tech, it's time to talk about how art might make use of this. So for that, I'll hand you to the next phase for Sebastian Schroeder.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Wow, thank God it's only 20 of you, otherwise I'd be nervous. Right, thanks for having me. I'm here on behalf of the Planet Content team, and we're very excited to finally show you some of the things we've been working on. As you've just seen from Will and Ali, the system keeps growing, both complexity and capability, so our libraries have to grow alongside it. Wait, should I click? No. No, I should click. Oh, there we go. So, our goal with the content is to provide the content that the system needs to populate every corner of every planet with realistic environments. And this content is what this phase of Genesis is all about, emergent biomes. For our first example of today, it's almost a shame Will left because it's about moisture, but let's look at very high moisture and medium to high temperature.
Wow. Wow. Okay, that is actually awesome. This is insane, guys. Like, genuinely look at that. He's crashed it. Oh God. That is amazing.
Thanks, it is really good. So, for swamps, we obviously made vegetation that fits along in water. But before we dive in, allow me to give you a quick primer on our approach to earth and plants. Most species can survive in a fairly wide range of climate conditions, but will only thrive if conditions are ideal. To support this concept, we offer our vegetation assets to describe